We are joined by Chief Economist at Econometrix Dr Azar Jammine. Thank you once again, Dr. Jammine, for joining us. A lot has been said, of course, about the impact of greylisting and how it will have an adverse effect on the already ailing South African economy. But I'm quite encouraged by the fact that countries such as Cambodia and Morocco have managed to exit the greylisting, which means that there is hope if we follow the 8 steps that the organization has put in front of us to say, if you can sort out these 8 issues, then you'll be able to get out of greylisting. Do you think it's something that the government is able to do?
I do believe the government is capable of doing it, but whether there will be the political will to do so remains to be seen, because we have been seeing over the last few months how endemic the aspect of corruption and the absence of law and order in this country has been to deal with many of these issues. So one has to conclude that even though it is quite possible to get out of greylisting in a fairly short space of time, one is uncertain as to whether or not there will be processes put into place to effect such a possibility and outcome.
Yeah, unlike us here in South Africa, Nigeria has also been added to the grey list, and they have a much better economic growth outlook than we do. They are sitting at around more than 3% right now, doing far better than we. What kind of impact is this likely going to have on that economy, given that they're quite driven by oil and trading of oil?
You know, you mustn't see greylisting as having an instantaneous effect, negative effect on economic growth. It's more a case of it involving an increase in bureaucratic processes to monitor what is happening, and that acts as a drag on economic activity over a longer period of time. It makes people a little more reluctant to make deals and to deal with a particular country. That impinges upon the medium to longer term rather than having an immediate negative effect on economic growth. So I still believe that Nigeria's economy will be able to grow in excess of 3% this year, and South Africa's economy's growth will not be too negatively affected this year. But what it does do is entrench the view that our economy is going to achieve suboptimal growth for a number of years to come unless we get out of this.
Dr. Jammine, Davi wrote earlier on, spoke to us and shared with us, in fact, that there's a great possibility that as South Africa, we may also exit the AGOA agreement that we have with the United States. When you take these two issues together and you put them together, how do they weigh on this South African economy and the outlook from an economic perspective?
Well, AGOA has some specific benefits to South Africa. Clearly, the United States can't be too enamored by the fact that South Africa is having carrying out military exercises with Russia and China at the moment. And that is obviously, I would have thought, influencing their desire to carry on giving us preferential trade. But you've also got to realize that our trade with the United States is not the be-all and end-all in terms of the economy. Of course, it will have a negative effect, and in particular on certain specific industries that are benefiting from AGOA. But in terms of the impact on overall economic growth, it's not as dramatic as it sounds. There will be a negative impact, but not dramatically so. All these factors really impinge upon the longer-term economic growth performance and act as deterrents to foreign direct investment, which is what is needed to try and spur economic growth. But from a short-term, immediate point of view, the impact is not as dramatic as might meet the eye. Yeah.
Naturally, going back to the issue of greylisting, Dr. Jammine, I just want to talk about what does this mean for trading of South Africa with other greylisted countries? maybe you can educate us on that. Or what does it mean that now we are grey-listed? Can we continue trading, or will we be with other grey-listed countries, or will we now be looking at each other as you're grey-listed, we're grey-listed, let's just do business together?
You know, grey-listing does not stop you from trading with another country.
Yeah.
It should be seen as the imposition of certain demands and conditions that you meet before trade can take place. It doesn't prevent trade. And then the other point to make is that most of South Africa's trade is with countries that where grey-listing will actually necessitate these additional processes. The amount of trade we do with other countries that are grey-listed is actually rather small. Most of our trade is with the likes of China, the United States, Germany, Britain, France, and other such advanced economies.
I know that the market has obviously had factored this in, but we're more likely to see the rand react. I have not been looking at what it has been doing, but according to what Davi said earlier on, it already has been weakening. Can we expect it to bridge the 19 rand mark because of this?
I don't believe that this in itself will necessarily negatively impact on the exchange rate too far. The rand is unbelievably cheap already, and I think that this might be the catalyst that causes that final sell-off in the currency. I think the currency has already weakened over the last several months, possibly to some extent on account of the potential for grey-listing. So a lot of that has already been discounted. It's interesting to see that the currency has weakened, but not by a huge amount since the announcement.
Yeah.
And that is a sign that, a lot of this has already been built into the currency.
Yeah, I really love to hear your thoughts about all these range of issues that we are going through. But before I let you go, can I get your views on the recent appointment of Khalib Kasim, the CFO at Eskom, and what you make of that and the stability of the executive at the power utility?
Well, I suppose it's at least elements. It does produce an element of stability that one senior appointment has been made to Eskom, and in a fairly important position such as financial management. But we have to see what happens with the operational side of Eskom before we can conclude that we're out of the woods, and especially the chief executive. One is concerned that there has been and will be further exodus of senior management. Just a CFO alone is an important appointment, but it doesn't cover all the grounds of management. It's a huge organization and does require a lot of top-line appointments, and I'm not sure that those are in place to the extent desired yet.
But at least we know that because he's being a CFO, he'll know what to do with that 258 million and the attention, everything that has been attached in terms of how it should be used that was given. I'm sure his credentials gives us a lot more comfort.
Certainly they do, but some of the conditions that have been imposed on Eskom to effect this transfer of its debt to the government are fairly stringent, and one is totally unclear as to whether it will actually receive the support of government itself, because what these conditions affect is that Eskom has to agree to allow independent monitors from overseas who are specialized in coal-fired power stations to come and exert oversight over its power stations. That is ceding a lot of power to independent private sources from overseas, which is the right thing to do. But I don't know how well this will go down with the ANC. It requires that government outsource maintenance work to private operators. Again, there is such antagonism within certain factions of the ANC to anything to do with the private sector that one wonders whether Kasim will be able to overcome these shortcomings at all. And more generally, I think he's going to be caught in a huge ideological divide that exists within the ruling party between those who support attracting the private sector increasingly into solving electricity supply problems and other forces that want government to be in total control of this. Watch this space, watch the cabinet reshuffle that will take place, that is likely to take place soon, before we can be too excited about the ability of this new CFO to actually introduce the changes that are needed at Eskom and that have been announced by National Treasury. National Treasury alone is not in control of government, unfortunately.
Yeah. Dr. Jammine, always a great pleasure speaking to you, and thank you so much for sharing your sentiments. And of course, we are watching closely all the reactions that are coming out of that developing story that South Africa has indeed, as expected, been grey-listed.